following is a summary of the Sicha of Shabbos Parshas Bamidbar, Tov Shin Nun Aleph. On that particular year, Shavuos was on a Sunday and a Monday, and hence it was just preceded by the Shabbos Parshas Bamidbar, and that's important to know for the flow of the Sicha. So the Rebbe starts off by saying the following. Every single Yontif has a specific directive for us. However, there's something additional and specific that we can learn from the calendar fixation of that Yontif. And as mentioned, in the year Nun Aleph, Shavuos was on a Sunday and a Monday, which means it was directly following and under the influence of the holiness of Shabbos. And therefore, everything is Bahashgacha Pratis, and we therefore need to look into what is the idea of Shabbos and how does that affect the Yontif of Shavuos. So let's first off start off with Shabbos. The Gemara says in Shabbos Daf Pei Vav Amud Beis that Kule Alma, according to all opinions, Shabbos Nitzna Torah LiYisrael, that the Torah was given on Shabbos. It wasn't given on any other day of the week, it was specifically given on Shabbos. So from this we can understand that there is an intrinsic connection between Torah and Shabbos. What is that connection? Well, let's first of all have a look at what Shabbos is. Chazal say that after the 6 days of creation, everything was complete. Ma haya ha'olam chaser, but what was the world lacking? Menucha, rest, tranquility. Bas Shabbos, bas menucha. When Shabbos came, rest came along with it. And that's expressed in the benching of Shabbos when we say Harachamanu Yanchilenu L'Yom Shkol Shabbos Umenucha L'Chayei Ho'elamim. And in Mincha of Shabbos we also say, we call it a Menucha Shalema, a complete day of rest, cessation of work, and tranquility. That is also the theme of the giving of the Torah. Because in the Gemara Shabbos Daf Peches Amud Aleph, Chazal say, on the verse Vayhi Erev Vayhi Voiker Yom Hashishi in Bereshis, on the 6th day of creation, it said there was evening and there was morning, Yom Hashishi. So the Gemara asks, Hey Yoseira Lomeli, it should just say Yom Shishi. Why does it say Yom Hashishi? Says the Gemara, because the world was in a shaky state. In fact, from the beginning of creation until the 6th day of the month of Sivan, the world was waiting to see if the Jewish people would accept the Torah. And the Gemara brings a pasuk which says, Eretz Yara V'Shakata. The land trembled and then was silent. B'tchila Yara, in the beginning it was very worried, perhaps the Jews wouldn't accept the Torah, but on the 6th day, Yom Hashishi, when they did accept the Torah, everything calmed down. So we see that Torah also has the idea of menucha, of tranquility. So what is the connection between the menucha of Shabbos and the menucha of Torah? The world in general is created as a moving place. It's a dynamic. And the truth is that's the opposite of tranquility, starting off with shinuyim, with changes in time. In fact, the word shana is from the word shinuyim. You've got past, present, and future, and you have changes in place, different locales, different customs. On Shabbos, what can be heard is amidst all that change, there is one intent in creation. And that intent is, it was created by one God for a specific purpose. And that's why Shabbos is transcendent of time. We have day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Shabbos, we don't go then on to day 8, we start the cycle again. Similarly, on Shabbos, we don't go out of our place. We haven't got any changes in space. What we're meant to do is to have a moment which is transcendent of time, an island of tranquility, and where we don't move in space. And on the giving of the Torah, that was the complete revelation of the concept of menucha, because the purpose of creation was revealed to all at the giving of the Torah. By way of explanation, change is difficult. It actually brings us a certain pizur hanefesh, a scatterbraining of soul. And when a person doesn't attribute all the different changes to a certain purpose, that can be very hard for a person. But when a person, amidst all that change, understands and feels the singular one quintessent point of life, that brings them menuchas hanefesh or menuchas haguf, tranquility of soul and tranquility of body. And even more so, when they have that inner tranquility, they are then able to project that tranquility into all echelons and areas of their involvement in life. Torah teaches us that the purpose of creation is lases lo yizborach dira b'tachtonim, to create a dwelling place for Hashem down here in this world. And we do that by adherence to Torah and mitzvahs. And by extension, we influence those around us of the non-Jewish nations to keep their mitzvahs as well. And thereby, we bring actually menucha, tranquility, to the world. Because the world starts to understand what its purpose is, and it becomes meaningful. And that provides tranquility. Shabbos blesses all the days of the week, because when one has the experience of that menucha on Shabbos, one's whole week is completely different. That reflects itself in our service of Hashem. There are 613 mitzvahs, and there's a whole variety and array of mitzvahs in all their details. But yet there again, there's a single thread that goes through all the mitzvahs, and that is Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvahs avetzivanu, that the Almighty has commanded us. There is a rotzain, a divine will in the mitzvahs that transcends the details of the mitzvahs. And that is why, in fact, we don't join necessarily mitzvahs together. Mitzvahs have to be done individually. That is in order that we should be focused on the mitzvah that we're doing, but the inner will in the mitzvah transcends the details of the mitzvah. So, in fact, every mitzvah has what's called a kavana klolis, a general intent, and a kavana pratis, a specific intent. The specific intent is the specific idea of that mitzvah and how it refines the person and brings godliness down to the world. The general intent is the rotzain, is the will of Hashem, which is within each and every mitzvah. In fact, that's brought out most in the mitzvah of ahavas Hashem, the love of God, which should be b'chol levavecha, with all your heart. Now, you know that in the heart is constantly in a state of movement, of pumping blood through the whole body. We would call this rotzei v'shuv, running and returning. The Sefer Yetzirah, an early Kabbalistic work, writes, Im rotz libcha shuv le'echad. If your heart runs, return to the one. What does that mean? That means, although there's a constant dynamic, a toing and a fromming, a movement, but nevertheless, all that should be permeated by the tranquility of the oneness of God, by the oneness of purpose, and the oneness of intent. That's called the Rotzein Echad, the one singular desire. How do you achieve that? That's achieved through the soul dynamic of bittul, of self-effacement, of nullification. When one's entire being is an eved, a servant of the Almighty, or as the Mishnah in Kiddushin expresses itself, Ani nivresi l'shamesh eskoini. I'm created in order to serve my master. And the Talmud says, Eved melech melech, the servant of the king, becomes like the king in the sense that there's such dissolution in the very being of the servant, they just by extension become like an arm of the king. There's a beautiful interpretation provided by the Baal Shem Tov on a verse in Tehillim, chapter 102, where the pasuk says, Tefillah le'oni chiyatoi ve'lifnei Hashem yishboich sichoi. Simply translated, it's a prayer of the poor man when he is faint with affliction and pours out his tale of woe before the Lord. The Baal Shem Tov interprets the pasuk like this. Tefillah la'oni, what is the prayer of the poor man? Lifnei Hashem yishboich sichoi, that he should be able to pour out his prayer before God. In other words, there's nothing going to be in between him and God. He's a poor man, and his prayer is that his prayer should go directly to God. That's the difference between a rich man and a poor man. A rich man understands wealth. He understands grandeur and may be distracted by it as well. A poor man doesn't understand that. He just goes for the source. In its spiritual parallel, a person who may contemplate the expanse of the metaphysical universes of the higher worlds, even the greatest revelations, may be distracted by them. The poor man who is unaware of all that just goes straight to God. And that is what the Gemara says, Anin mispalel adase hatinoik, that even the greatest mind should pray like a child, because ultimately we want that simplistic, pristine connection. So it's the idea of bringing the quintessence within all the detail. In fact, that's hinted to in the word melech. Melech, meaning a king, is made up of three words. Moyach, leiv, kaved. Moyach, a brain, leiv, a heart, kaved, a liver. A brain is cold and still. The heart is warm and moving. So how do we fuse the two? That is in the liver, where there's blood, but in fact it is not moving. And the idea over here is that there's detail, but it has to be permeated and elevated by the quintessence, by the point and the tranquility of knowledge that this is all part and parcel of the oneness of Hashem and his will. Now, that was all revealed in its completeness at the giving of the Torah. The Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai, completely nullified. We know that because they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll do it and then we'll hear it. And then because of that bittul, they experience Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the revelation of Atzmos, of the essence of godliness. There was the Kabbalas HaMalchus, the acceptance of the kingship of God. And thereafter, Kablu Gezeiroisai, accepting my decrees. And of course, thereafter, after Sinai, Torah lo b'shamayim, Torah didn't remain in the heavens. It was given down here in earth to make peace in earth. Lasos shalom ba'olam. Because ultimately, we want to take that oneness of the Anochi and bring that heaven down to earth, permeating every aspect of earthliness with that oneness and connection with the will of the Almighty. And therefore we now understand also the preparation to the giving of the Torah. First, there's the days of Sphira, where we work on ourselves and we arrive at Sinai with the ultimate of Bittul. And through that, we merit the Onoichi, the revelation of the essence. And thereafter, we get all the mitzvahs, and in its physical counterpart, the Jews actually didn't lack anything in the detail. They had the tremendous material wealth which they came out of Egypt, and also by the spoils of the sea. And they had also the Gilui Merkava, a revelation of the Merkava of all the high spiritual worlds. So in fact, the fusion of the point and the detail actually results in having both of them together. And so now we understand what the connection between Shabbos is and Shavuos, and the beautiful fixation of having Shavuos immediately after and under the influence of the day of Shabbos. First we have the tranquility of Shabbos, and then we can go into Shavuos with the feeling of the Noisen HaTorah, of the giver of the Torah. And thereafter, that brings that menucha down into all the details of Torah, and thereafter into the world. Where was Torah given? It was given in a desert. A desert is an uninhabitable place. Nobody ever has lived there. The novelty of Matan Torah is that even in a desert, you can bring that menucha, that tranquility. You can bring tranquility into a place which is the opposite of tranquility. And that's why the Jews were counted there, because each one was meaningful and countable even in that place of a desert. And that is a beautiful idea for whichever circumstance we may be in, even in a spiritual wasteland, as long as we've got the point, the quintessence of the Torah, which is the menucha, the tranquility of knowing that ani nivresi l'shamash eskoini, that the point of my very being is to serve the Almighty and fulfill His will, that can be done anywhere, even in a desert. What's the directive in Ma'aseh B'Poel? The first is Chadoshim Mamash. Every single year, Shavuos is renewed, a renewed acceptance of the Torah, a renewal of the understanding and feeling of the giver of the Torah. And especially this year, the idea of the permeating of everything we do with the menucha, with the tranquility of Shabbos, that the giver of the Torah and the details of the Torah should all be experienced in inner calm and tranquility. That all starts with an additional learning of the Torah, especially in Chitas, Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya. Chumash, of course, its connection with Shavuos, because Chumash was written by Moshe Rabbeinu, who received the Torah on Shavuos. Tehillim by David HaMelech, whose Yortzeit is Shavuos. And Tanya, who, although written by the Alter Rebbe, is the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, whose Yortzeit also is on Shavuos. And in addition, we should have an addition of learning of Rambam amidst all the other various shiurim in Torah. And here the Rebbe touches upon and asks for a very specific thing. That in addition to the general shiurim which we learn and the individual specific study schedule of individuals, in addition to that, we should also write novel ideas in Torah. In Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, there is an obligation on each person to be mechadesh in Torah, to draw out novel ideas in Torah, although that has to be in accordance with the general principles, but nevertheless, there is an obligation for each individual to be mechadesh, to draw something new in Torah. And the reason is very simple, is because each one has a unique perspective in Torah. And that should be given out in written form, in terms of printing novel ideas in pamphlets, in books, and when a person, of course, has to write it, it becomes much more detailed, succinct, it becomes much more palatable and clear, and of course clear in the person's mind in order to be made clear for the student who is receiving it. And all that will bring additional menucha to the worlds and will take away the halomis v'hesterim, the concealments of this physical world, so that we will be able to see through the veneer and see the oneness of godliness in the world and the oneness of purpose and the oneness of ani nivresi l'shamash eskoini, of serving the Almighty and fulfilling His will. And all that should be miyad, immediately with the coming of Mashiach. The word miyad also is the Rosh Tevis. Mem stands for Moshe, Yud stands for Yisrael, the Baal Shem Tov, and David Malka Mashiach, David HaMelech, who is the ancestor of Mashiach. So much so that very soon we should be able to say Shalom Aleichem to Mashiach, and he will answer Aleichem Shalom. We'll say Shalom Aleichem to Mashiach because he contains all the souls of our generation, and he will say Aleichem Shalom to us because he's saying hello to all our deeds and our actions done now in the time of Golus that have precipitated his coming. May it be miyad, immediately.